Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love with no artificial sweeteners and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.
Hello everybody, it's Tyler with 3D Printing Basics. If you guys were interested in getting every single episode of this podcast, 3D Printing Basics, ad-free and a week early, and also getting exclusive perks such as exclusive episodes that only you can listen to and more, then subscribe on Patreon. My link will be down below. I would really appreciate it if you guys would consider supporting me. All the support I've already received has meant the world to me, so thank you guys so much. If not, no worries. Continue to consume these episodes for free, and I appreciate you listening regardless. So thank you guys very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 106, and in this week's episode, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the company Formlabs. So I wanted to do this episode specifically because I actually just got a Formlabs SLA printer. It's a Formlabs Form 3L. I picked it up used, and so far, I really love my experience with it, and so I wanted to kind of break it down and dive deep into the company, kind of figure out what they're about, where they come from, and why they made such a great printer. So yeah, with that being said, I just wanted to remind everybody that the Instagram is up and live. We've been posting a little bit, and I've been posting some updates, what I'm doing in my 3D printing space, along with notifications that episodes are uploaded, etc. As soon as we get to 1,000 followers on the 3D Printing Basics Instagram, then I will be giving away a brand new printer to one of those followers. So make sure you share it with your friends. There's a link down below. Follow it yourself. Once we get to 1,000 followers, I will be doing a giveaway. So with that being said, that's just about all I got for you. Let's jump right into today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening, and let's get right into it. So the company Formlabs, where did they start? Who are they? I don't know if a lot of people have heard of it or if nobody's really heard of it, but Formlabs to me was always somewhat of a foreign concept. I had heard of them throughout 3D printing. I had seen them at trade shows. I had seen them in some other people's shops actually, but I never actually ever really considered buying one myself because cost is the biggest thing. These Formlabs machines are extremely expensive. We're talking for the entire package. If you want to get a wash machine and a cure station as well, you're talking, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 in some cases. So really expensive, something that I could never really afford as a business owner and something that just didn't make a lot of sense for me. But I had recently got a job that was with SLA, and I was having a hard time on the printer that I have. I have an Elegoo Saturn IV Ultra. It's a great machine. I love it. I have absolutely no ill will towards the printer itself. We were printing a super difficult to print engineering resin, and it was having a hard time. There was kind of no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and I was kind of tinkering here and there. Things weren't really working out. I was getting a little frustrated, and I started looking around online for maybe some better SLA printers, because my thought process was kind of the same reason that I have all these bamboo printers. As a business owner, I can't afford to be spending my time just going around fixing printers, tinkering with them. I need something that I can buy and plug in and it just works and I don't have to worry about that. And the Formlabs ecosystem, as I was researching, was something that really came up and was really attractive in that sense of being something that just works. It has RFID tags, so it reads whatever resin you put in. It knows the tank. It knows the lifespan. It's just a very knowledgeable ecosystem, and it's very good at just knowing everything that's going on with the printer. And it just works. They have sincerely and really finely dialed in their resins, and so when I put it in there, I have a lot of confidence that it would just work. So I started looking around, and on Facebook Marketplace, I found a great deal on a Form 3L, which is the larger version of their Form 3s. So they have the Form 1s, the Form 2s, the Form 3s, and their newest line, the Form 4s. I knew I wasn't going to be able to afford a Form 4. Those things are really, really expensive, but I was hoping I could find a used Form 2 or Form 3. And the Form 3L was right in my area. It was a really good deal. I went out, looked at it, everything looked great. I managed to pick it up. It also came with the wash station, the Form Wash L, and then the Form Cure L as well. So it was a whole package for a really good deal. I couldn't really pass it up, and so I decided to go for it. And I got it set up last week. It's part of the reason why there was no episode last week is because I was busy setting this thing up and trying to get it to work. And once I got it running and verified that everything worked, I immediately started on this customer's print. I used a different type of resin that was very comparable to the engineering resin that I was failing with on the Elegoo machine, and it worked immediately. There was absolutely no issues, no problems. I didn't have to stop the machine once. It didn't throw any errors at me. It just worked. The print took a long time. We're talking 51 or 52 hours. I can't remember exactly. But the good thing about it is that it just worked, and I was able to take it off the machine after it was done, put it through the entire ecosystem of the wash machine, which is really great. You take the build plate off and you put the build plate directly in the wash machine. It agitates, gets all the extra resin off of the printed part, and then you put it in the cure machine, which has dialed in cure profiles for each resin that you're using. So if you use a Formlabs resin, it knows exactly how long to cure it for, what temperature, et cetera, et cetera. So that was really great. I just popped it in there, and then 2 hours later, it took it out. It was completely done, and it was ready to go. And it works great. It looked great. It was actually a mold that I was making for a customer, so I'm excited to see him test it out. He should be testing it out this week. Let me know how it goes, and I'm really excited for it. But that was definitely something that really was, I knew it was coming, but I was still blown away by the ease of use of this machine and its ecosystem, and so that whole experience that I had made me want to kind of dive deeper into Formlabs and tell you guys about it. So yeah, with that being said, let's just go ahead and jump right in it. So Formlabs, it was founded in 2011, which is really not that long ago, for it to be as big and well known of a company as it is now. And it sells SLA printers as well as SLS printers. Now, I don't know if you guys remember the episodes I did a while back on SLA printing and SLS printing. SLS is the powder fusion technology where it takes powder and then cures it one layer at a time. SLA is the resin form of that. So it takes the UV light and then it cures all that, but we're going to get deeper into that. So they sell both, and their kind of positioning and goal as a company is to be the Apple of 3D printing. They want to have their own ecosystem. They don't want you to bring any third-party products into that ecosystem. They want you to only use Formlab products with Formlabs machines and so on and so forth. But it is a really high-quality machine and a high-quality ecosystem that you're entering when you get the machine. They have RFID tags on everything, including the bottles of resin. So if you insert a bottle of resin in the machine, it knows exactly what resin it's using. It knows exactly the settings, the temperature, and even especially if you use a tank too, if you're using their resin tanks, then it has an RFID chip in there. You could set the tank what resin is in the tank, and it immediately knows that when you put it in there. So all of that is dialed in, and then once you get everything dialed in and ready to go, you just have to press a couple buttons on the screen, and then everything just kind of works. And that was their goal. They are definitely not competing with the budget printers like the one that I just had, the Elegoo Saturn 4 Ultra, which, like I said, still a great printer, great hobbyist printer, but that is not the market that Formlabs is going for. They are not trying to be like a Creality where they get the cheapest printer that does the most for the hobbyist or somebody just getting into 3D printing. No, they are for the engineers, the industrial side of 3D printing. That's why they are so expensive, and that is why they are so high quality. So that is kind of the demographic that they're going for, and I'd say that they've done a really nice job of creating products that cater directly to that demographic. They just come up with some really high quality products, and they keep getting better and better. So now that we know what Formlabs is and what they do, I just want to do a quick rundown of SLA printing itself. I know I kind of already did it, but I wanted to get more in depth with it. I do have one of the first episodes I ever did was FDM versus SLA. I think it was episode number 4 or something like that. So if you want to learn more about SLA printing in depth, feel free to head back to my early episodes and kind of check those out, and you can definitely learn a little something there. But stereo lithography 3D printing, it uses a resin that can be UV cured, and it goes layer by layer, and there's a UV light. Sometimes it's bounced off a mirror up into that vat of resin, the UV curable resin, and sometimes it's just projected straight up, but it only projects the sort of build that you want, and then the UV light runs through that sort of, what do you call it? It's sort of like a stencil. So it goes layer by layer, and it lays out the stencil for that layer. And the UV light goes through, and it only cures through that stencil to get the exact layer that you want, and then it goes up and continues. And so the attractive thing about SLA 3D printing is they do really, really fine layer heights. So for reference, FDM 3D printing does, usually their standard is with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, it's 0.2 millimeter layer heights. SLA 3D printing does 0.05 or 0.025 millimeter layer heights. They also do 0.1, but those are microns. So they do 25, 50, 100 micron microns. And for a micron comparison, FDM does about 2,000 microns. So really, really fine print quality there. It's just something that is that is specifically for SLA, and why it's so attractive, because with such small layer heights, you also get the really, really fine details that come with it. You know, you can achieve almost an injection molded quality part. I say almost, it's not quite, but it is very comparable to injection molded parts. It does take a lot longer than FDM printing, certainly, but at the end of the day, if you're using an SLA printing, you kind of know the trade-offs. You're trading off time for a quality that is almost uncomparable to FDM. It's definitely a lot better quality if you're going for these super high detailed, super high quality prints that you're wanting to get. You also have a little bit more variety in terms of the engineer resins. It's a little bit easier to print something that could be used in a medical field or a dental field versus if you're using an FDM and you want something that's printed in a medical field. Usually it's a lot more costly and it's a lot harder to print. With resin, it's a little bit easier, and you have a little bit more access to the medical and the dental sort of grades. But I understand that's not really what anybody's going for here that's listening to this podcast, so we'll just kind of skip that. But yeah, so FDM, you're going to be looking at kind of melted plastic. I always like to explain FDM as a hot glue gun that's moving around. Essentially, it's just it's melting the plastic, pushing it out onto whatever previous layer you had to build up your part, whereas SLA is smooth. It uses resin and UV cured light to partially cure the resin as it builds up layer by layer, and then you come out, you wash it, and then you cure it the rest of the way. So that's kind of the main differences between SLA and FDM, and kind of what I wanted to get through was just comparing those two and why SLA is something that is definitely sought after, especially with the industrial side of things. People want the almost injection molded look, and they're just looking for the highest quality products and kind of finishes that you can find. And SLA, especially Formlabs machines, are really good at providing that. So that's definitely what makes them so popular. And so one of the things, or a couple of things that make Formlabs different from these other competitors, these other SLA printers, is the kind of technology that they use to cure the resin or to make their SLA printers. So they use what's called low force stereolithography. So normal SLA printers for a long time, it's definitely shifting more away from that. But what it used to do is you'd cure it. So you'd have the resin vat, and then on the bottom of the vat, you'd have what's called the FEP sheet. So it's an FEP sheet. It's a very, very thin layer of plastic that presses right up against basically the glass that the UV light shines through. And so every time that you have the resin, right? So it gets cured against that plastic, right? So you have the cured layer of your resin up against that plastic. So it's sticking to the plastic. And then what else can you really do except pull it up, because you need to get it unstuck, obviously. So the machine pulls the build plate up, which peels the the resin off of that plastic, ready to stick it down and get another layer. Now, the problem with that is that's a really high stress sort of action. If you're peeling it straight up, then that's a really high stress action. It could pull your resin parts off the build plate. It could rip that sheet, and then you get resin everywhere. It could cause just tons of problems. And that's just kind of the way it was for a long time. But Formlabs came along with a different kind of technology. So rather than having the flat plastic and then the build plate just pulling straight up off of it, so pulling the entire plate off all at once, they actually came up with a droopy sort of plastic. And instead of having the UV light just kind of shine up, they have it on rollers, so it goes back and forth and back and forth. And so while it's curing it, it also unsticks it. But so instead of sticking it all at once, unsticking the whole entire part all at once and creating all that stress, it unsticks it a little bit at a time, peeling a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And that creates really low forces, which wildly increases your chances of success for SLA printing. It makes sure that the resin parts won't get pulled off the build plate, so you won't have any issues with that. It makes sure that your resin tank or whatever the plastic sheet, it won't get ripped, and then you can use it a lot longer because it won't stretch or anything like that. And overall, it's just a much better habit, or a much better sort of form of technology for 3D printing. And my Elegoo Saturn 4 Ultra, it used a slightly different method of that. It just tilted the tank at an angle, so it was peeling it off with lower forces rather than just pulling it off while it was straight all at the same time. But yeah, SLA is definitely shifting more towards that style of kind of getting the initial cured layer off of the plastic sheet. And it makes a lot of sense, and something that I really like to see. And Formlabs have kind of their own process. They've kind of mastered their own process of the rollers and getting that to be a very successful form of 3D printing with a very high success rate and a very low failure rate. And another thing that kind of sets them apart is their print quality. They have 25 to 50 micron layer heights, which is what I was talking about earlier. They have a really smooth finish. But the other biggest thing that sets it apart is definitely going to be the ease of use. So from beginning to end, we're looking at all the way from the pre-slicing software. They have their own. It's called Preform. It's free to use. Everything is automated. You can click one-click setup, and it literally sets up the entire print. You just upload your 3D model file, you click that button, and everything gets oriented. The supports get generated. All you have to do is click the resin, and then you're pretty much good to go. And then you can send that straight to your printer. And then, of course, like I said, with the printer itself, if you put a bottle of Formlabs resin in there, it has the RFID chip, which detects exactly what kind of resin it is. So your printer knows exactly what resin it's printing. You have the tank in there that also has a chip, because the tanks are removable and you have to use different tanks for different materials for this one. You can't just clean one tank out and pour different resin in. You actually need separate tanks. And those have RFID chips. So if you set what kind of resin is in there, it will remember what resin is in there. And then once you take it out of the machine itself, you take it to the Formlabs wash station, which is specifically built for Formlabs 3D printers and not really anything else. And then you have the cure station, which, like I said, has its own built-in profiles for whatever resin you're using. You can use any of the Formlabs resin, and you press a button and it automatically sets the cure time for you. You don't have to do anything else. So I just went through this whole entire process for the first time, and the ease of use is, honestly, it's pretty amazing. Especially with something like SLA, where kind of the post-processing and the extra steps is why I stayed away from it for so long. This kind of ecosystem, it makes it a lot easier and makes everything kind of stress-free, and you just boom, 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 and then before you know it, you have a finished part, and that's kind of why I've enjoyed this. And with that being said, Formlabs is definitely not perfect. They have their pros and they have their cons as well. I just listed out a bunch of pros, so I think it's time to list some cons. And some of the cons are going to be the consumables. There is a couple consumables here. So the resin, of course, is a usual consumable, but also the resin tanks. So the resin tanks are kind of marketed as their own thing. They advertise that you need a different tank for each kind of resin you're using. So if you have 5 different resins that you want to print, you're going to need 5 different resin tanks. And the consumables are not cheap. Each bottle of resin costs about $200 per liter, and that's way more expensive than my Saturn IV Ultra, which I was getting, liters of resin for about, I want to say $15 to $20. So it's way more expensive. The resin tanks themselves are about $200 a piece. So really, if you want to start printing with a new resin, you're looking at least $400 to start printing with a new resin. So that's extremely expensive. On top of the Formlabs machines just being super expensive themselves, it is not cheap to get involved with Formlabs in any way, shape, or form. And so that is definitely something to look out for. For me, it made sense just with the reliability and the ability that I had to get one of these machines. I found such a good deal. I just had to pull the trigger on it. And but that is definitely something to look out for, is that the cost is large. It's a large cost, and definitely something to look in for. Another thing that is definitely perceived as a negative would be their closed ecosystem. You can run other resins in there if you really want to, but they have made it incredibly hard for that to work or make any sense other than using their own resins. They have their own specially formulated bottles, their own unique shape that is not manufactured anywhere else. They only use their Formlabs resins, with how easy it is and how auto detect it detects all the Formlabs resins and all that. It just really doesn't make sense to use anything other than not use any third-party resins and just use Formlabs resins. So that is definitely something that is definitely perceived as a negative, especially in the 3D printing world, where we want everything to be open source and kind of tinkerable. Formlabs is pretty much the opposite of that. So that is definitely some of the cons to look out for. But overall, I would definitely say that if you have the need for it, and you especially have the money for it, that's going to be the biggest thing, then Formlabs is not a bad option when you're looking at SLA printing. It's very high quality and very reliable, and that is why I have enjoyed them so far. So with that being said, that's kind of all I had for you guys today. This episode's getting a little long, but I hope you guys enjoyed learning about Formlabs, the company, and now know a little bit more about the 3D printing space. So don't forget, 1,000 followers on Instagram. I'm giving away that 3D printer. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next time.